In March of 2022, a man named Eric Richins was found dead in his bed in Summit County, Utah. He had 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl in his system. 3 weeks prior to that, which was Valentine's Day, he ate a sandwich that his wife had bought for him at a local deli. He got sick. He called his sister, and he told her that he thought Kouri, his wife, was trying to poison him. He survived. He gave himself some of his son's Benadryl. He just slept it off. And then he went home to her. And 3 weeks later, he was dead. So this jury heard that Eric Richins told multiple people before he even died that if anything ever happened to him, Kouri did it. We're going to walk through what that changes about this case and what it still won't answer. So I'll be honest, John, I'm having a hard time remaining neutral on this. And I know that you're going to push back on this, but go ahead, make the case. I want to hear it.
I guess what surprises me about us even talking about this prior incident with the sandwich is how non-evidency it all rather seems to me. We don't have the sandwich. We can't run that through the state lab to see if there's any kind of fentanyl or any other poisons in the sandwich. We don't have Eric to testify, unfortunately, as to whether or not he actually felt like impending doom was his situation. Now we have our comments made out of context with other people. And frankly, without having that direct evidence of the poison, without having any of the fentanyl in the cups from the Moscow mules in the house, it just feels like the prosecution is desperately trying to bolster this narrative of how the fentanyl got into Eric Richins' body by way of Kouri Richins. And to me, it's just, I get that it's circumstantial evidence, but to me, it's just a little bit too what if at this point. It'd be one thing even if Eric had texted somebody and said, I think that Kouri might have tried to kill me. And then we could see from the context of that conversation if that was a joke. But for me, I'm forced to only take it as seriously as Eric did, which is to say he might have said that, hey, maybe Kouri was trying to kill me as a joke or seriously. But in either way, he went back home to Kouri and he had her prepare a celebratory drink for him. So he didn't seem to be too worried about accepting any meals or drinks prepared for him out of his sight. Drew?
So he survived. He named her and he went home. And then 3 weeks later, he was dead. So tonight, what does that sequence actually change? What doesn't it answer? We're going to talk about the testimony. We're going to go through the body cam. If you don't know who we are, I'm Drew. I am a 28-year, almost 29-year cop, retired. John is an active 911 dispatcher. So we are qualified to tell you about what we know in this investigation based on what we've learned. And that's what we're going to do. But before we get into the prosecution's framing of this whole thing, you've been pretty skeptical about how much weight those prior statements carry from like the troubled marriage. So kind of walk me through your thinking. I know that you just talked a little bit about it's circumstantial, but do you think that that's going to carry the weight? And we're going to watch, some trial footage. Walk me through it.
I think the problem is that a lot of people will look at the motive as, especially the romantic parts of it, as the main reason for her wanting to move on. You can go back and forth as to how much money she was due to inherit and whether or not that got cut out by Eric's sister being made the executor of his estate. You can also talk about whether or not the debt that she's in was serious versus how much she stood to gain from Eric's life insurance or from the purchase of this mansion that she was about to get through. But what it comes down for me is that a person could be dissatisfied with their life and they could be dissatisfied with their marriage and they can get into these entanglements with other people and they can get in real deep with those feelings. But no matter how much you want another life with another person and you want all the decisions to just be easy, it would be so easy if Eric was just out of the picture because you don't want to face the divorce. You don't want to face the litigation. You don't want to face the accusations, the bad conversations, the having to explain it to your children, to your friends, to your family. You can just say, wouldn't it just be easier if Eric was out of the way? It doesn't mean that at any point between 9 p.m. and 3 a.m. that you got up and put fentanyl in somebody's cup. You can want another life, and it doesn't mean that you did anything during the crucial hours that we're talking about.
That's true.
Problems, but also Kouri had herself a nice little boy toy on the side, and they were texting up until Eric Richins' death. Now, prosecutors say the text included this. It says, quote, on December 17th, 2021, the defendant told witness 8 that she felt stuck and trapped in her marriage and it would be better if Eric Richins just died.
If I was divorced right now and asked you to marry me tomorrow, would you? I just want to lay on the couch and cuddle you, watch a murder documentary and snuggle. I want you today, every day, not just sexually, but physically, mentally. Every day when I wake up, I do want a future together. I do want you. Figure life out together. If you could just go away and you could just be here, life would be so perfect. I love you. To me, you're worth millions a year. I'm honored to be your friend, best friend actually, lover, go-to. Life is gonna be different, I promise. You're one hell of a patient person. I hate your hard days. I wish I could be there to turn them around for you. Can I try Friday? Give me a few days. Hang in there until then, please. Love you.
Matt, what do you think here? What are you thinking for motive?
So before we get too far into what this former prosecutor, this is from
First of all, did you pay for that or did Court TV do that?
Court TV did that.
Because I want to know who got on Fiverr and said, would you read sexy text messages from an accused murderer?
They said that it was one of their producers.
The thing is that a lot of that looks like pre-planning. It's what makes it look premeditated. It's the difference between second degree and first degree in the minds of a lot of prosecutors. But to me, that's just fantasy. That's just the expression of deeply felt wishes. And again, it's all in the face of how many hardships she's facing. Like I said, the accusations, the negative things that go with divorce, the litigating things, breaking into the kids' family. She just wants everything to be easy. She just wants a life where everything's nice. And that's what those text messages are.
This is all supporting evidence, though. You can see from this search warrant here, a certain diner in Camas, Utah, known as the Diner, that, you know, like they've detailed, and you know, I'm going to let you read it in a second. It details what happened on that Valentine's Day. But we're going to hear from a prosecutor here. Just understand that it's this prosecutor's opinion. It's his framing, and you know, we'll ferret it out.
Well, this is a dream come true for a prosecutor. You know, have your choice. Pick whatever one you want. You have life insurance. You have mortgage fraud. You have a lover that jumped in here. You have huge debts, over $1 million worth of debt, and the idea that her husband, who she doesn't want, we heard the text, we've read the text, she doesn't want him around, she wants her lover, and if he's out of the way, on top of that, she comes into some money. So, you know, this is a dream for any prosecutor in terms of a motive. You don't really need a motive, as we all know, Vinny, but in this case, you have your choice. You can pick from a whole assortment of reasons why she would want her husband dead.
Just a quick thought on that. As he says, you don't need a motive, and that's true. And I don't mean this to be simple negation or being contrarian, as the way that you put it, but you can have all the motive in the world to kill somebody, and then they end up dying, and it doesn't mean that you did it, Drew.
Yeah, that's true. But you know, if your goal is to achieve justice for the family of the deceased, I think he makes a strong case that being able to tell the jury there's a reason. You know, like I understand what you just said, that, you know, we try people without motive, but when you have multiple motives, then it kind of makes the story a little bit better for the jury. And, you know, obviously they're in there for the truth and for justice, but I don't know. Maybe it's just,
it makes sense. I'm just saying, like, for a jury that has to make a very serious decision, it can't just be made on these soap operatic text messages that are being sent. I need proof that she's literally the proximate cause of his death.
She was so desperate, and she wanted, no question, to carry this out. This wasn't something she did on a whim. I mean, she tried to kill him months earlier on Valentine's Day with the sandwich that went awry, and then she poisoned him. So This wasn't, you know, a crime of
The sandwich that went awry.
I caught that. I believe me, I caught that.
passion. This isn't something she just lost her head and said, I'm at my wit's end. I got to get rid of him. This is something she planned, and she even planned for a bad outcome for herself.
So we've talked a little bit about what the jury actually heard, John, or what they're in the process of hearing. Understand that there's a whole, you know, like we're maybe trailing a week behind this, and there's a banger episode we got coming up where, you know, we show the actual boyfriend of Kouri who gets on the stand and breaks down in tears. There's a whole private investigator element to this, but I want to show you, like, now that you've seen what the jury saw, I want to show you what they actually, the body cam footage that brought them to the scene. That's kind of, you know, it's kind of our lane. It's what we can do because, you know, I've broke down my share of body cam footage and I've conducted my share of investigations. So we're just going to do this a little bit differently. So like you're watching this with me, if you think I'm reading into something the footage doesn't say, then you need to say that, but I'll try to break it down in the process.
People who are watching with us, if you think that Drew is laying it out wrong, make sure you put that in the comments section. He's going to respond to everything that you leave down there. So put it in the comment section below if you think you're taking away something from the body cam that experienced cop Drew isn't getting out of it. Go ahead, Drew.
Other than his asthma. Yeah, I mean, he has Lyme disease, but I mean, it's painful sometimes. There's medicine for it.
What does he take? What medicine does he take? Can you find it and tell us?
My first thoughts about this. You know, like the officers arrived, think this was a medical emergency. And so by the time the first contact was made, the information picture has already started to shift a little bit. Just watch what the officer's doing here and watch what he's managing at the same time. She's over there crying, but I don't know how to describe it. It just doesn't seem like the traumatic crying. It's the, I want you to know that I'm crying. Like it's kind of like a forced.
And you would know, Drew, you've had to break some pretty terrible news to some pretty bereft people.
Yeah. And just, you know, from the officer standpoint, you hear all that clicking and machinery, and you hear, you know, the woman crying in the background, and they're asking her about medicine, and like you're literally having to stay present. You got to like listen to what's going on in there, because that's going to be important for your investigation and for your report. But also you got like all these medical, you know, clicking machines doing CPR on the patient. It's
at the Lucas machine.
Yeah, the Lucas machine. It's kind of surreal at times. So he's looking around that room. Here's the other thing that you need to think about. This becomes a murder trial 3 years later or whatever it is, right? You know, there's an extensive investigation that went on involving a private investigator. Then it turned into law enforcement investigation, then turned over to a prosecutor. Then it becomes a trial. And by the time you're seeing this, you already know the end. You already know the conclusion. You know what happened in the story.
You know the answers to the tests, but as the officers and the paramedics on scene, they didn't even know they were being tested. They didn't know they were on the scene. They didn't know they were on a crime scene.
No. So as the officer with this body camera is looking around, he's kind of doing a plain view search. Let's take a look at what's on the table here. You know, some of the suspicious circumstances he's dealing with are like, this is a young guy and this is a young wife. Like there's no real people like that generally don't just die in their sleep. in the middle of the night. Like, yeah, it happens, but it's not as frequent as, like, say, an elderly person, that just passes away or something like that, or somebody with like
Modern era, like fentanyl is such a problem that it's shaped the president's foreign policy. I think that, taking a plain view search around the area, finding a bag of drugs, certainly something that police officers see often when they're going into medical situations. I think just collecting that on his body cam makes a lot of sense.
So watch what happens here, because the officer like starts learning things. That's going to change every decision he makes for the next couple minutes. But he pulls her out and he starts interviewing her, and we'll take a closer look at the interview.
Cam, you want to come out? What's your first name? What's your first name? Yeah, let me talk to you out here for a second. Let them do their work in there. So what happened today?
He was just fine. We were fine. Where have we heard that before, John? Do you remember?
Yeah, I'm going to say Sarah Boone.
Yeah, that's exactly where it was.
We were having a great day. We were playing games.
Yeah, everything was great. We were having a great day. It was a good day. She kept saying that. It's a bizarre statement, to be honest. Like, it's something he probably took note of, and hindsight's always going to be 2020. I'm not, picking on this guy. But these are the kinds of things that you listen out for. Like, it's an odd thing to say. Like, everything was fine. We were fine.
Just to be contrarian, she's taken her first step into an alternate universe in which her husband is gone. And she's probably wishing that she has the last 5 hours to go back in time, to go back to the way life just was. Life has just changed for her irrevocably. She could be pondering, life was normal, life was good, life was fine. Just to play devil's advocate.
So I appreciate that's what it looks like from where you sit. Like, I have to be careful here. A mother just found her husband dead, or a wife just found, her husband dead, and their kids are in the house. You're going to see more about that. It's just these little weird statements, and there's a whole lot of, which is like I'm crying.
You're making
trust
a
me.
sniffing sound, right?
trust me, I'm crying.
When you say we were fine, what time did you see him when he was alert?
The reason I say we were fine is kind of an odd statement, is because there's no Lucas machine hooked up to her. What's it got to do with her? So I understand people speak in generalities at times, but when she's talking about the two of them, she's generally saying we weren't fighting. And that's not what he asked. He's just kind of saying, hey, what that's not even on his mind.
No, he asked a very broad and open question, which I think is a great way to kick this off. Like, something you do when you open up conversation with somebody in crisis or someone who's taken hostages. How did we get here? Tell me about the last 24 hours. And I think that's what he's doing.
We had a drink together at 9 to celebrate something at work tomorrow.
Okay, just be real cognizant from a body language standpoint. Do her gestures match her rhythm? And do they match her words? Is she emphasizing, like she's slapping her thighs, and is she emphasizing words at the right time? And because those are important, and they don't necessarily mean that you're lying. It could mean that you're under an immense amount of stress, but you have to figure out why they're under that amount of stress. It's, obviously a stressful situation, but.
What time did you guys go to bed?
9:30.
9:30? Okay.
9:45.
And then what alerted you to him today, right now?
When I just woke up, when I sleep with my kids, I'll wake up and I go back in my own bed.
Mm-hmm.
I just crawled over on his side.
So, John, we've talked about this before when it comes to the 911 callers. And it's basically what you've described as, like, you're asking a specific question, like, where is he bleeding from? And then they give you an answer about their blood type and their DNA from birth all the way to that minute. That's what just happened here, though, and that doesn't normally happen in an interview unless they're trying to throw you off the scent of something. And he asked a very simple question, and she is giving a very rambling answer. It's a very easy answer. Like,
the drink coming into the conversation already is a little strange. I'll also say that, I don't know, just reading the body posture, it's not closed, but she does seem to be hiding her face a lot, you know, the burying
Yes.
your face in your hands. But again, just devil's advocate, what if this officer had asked her a question, you know, what happened? And she doesn't hardly say anything. What if she's just like, I don't know?
that's a typical response. That's actually a typical response. But this, you know, like, I don't want to get too far into the weeds about reading the body language. That's not my expertise. I can tell you about gesture clusters and stuff like that. I can tell you, though, that hiding burying your face in your hands, I've known this since, you know, I was a child. That's a sign of shame. You don't want to show your face. You don't want to make eye contact. It's not necessarily always about the eye contact, but it's about everything else that's going on around it. So just
I think you touched on something huge there. So let's suppose that she did do it. Let's suppose that she is responsible for Eric's death. It's entirely possible that we're seeing a mix of many emotions here. First of all, she's trying to hide. She's trying to hide her guilt. She doesn't want to be detected for the criminal role that she played, but she also wants to hide the shame that she certainly does feel. It's entirely possible that, you know, yesterday this seemed like a good idea, and now that Eric's actually dead, she has some real buyer's remorse about the situation, and she actually does feel sad that she's killed this man that she did love enough to marry and that she did have children with. I think it's entirely possible that it's not all one thing. It's not all just hiding, you know, your criminal intent. It could also be hiding the regret that you feel over the horrible decision that you made. I think, you know, if Kouri has any part of her that is a good person, that part of her is obviously appalled with herself right now.
So I want to talk a little bit about, you know, the children. We just brought up the children. I'm going to talk about them in a second. I also wanted to give you a little tip or a hint of what I would do if somebody had their face buried. But let's listen to a little bit more.
And he was laying.
By the way, keeping your face buried is also a way to hide whether you're actually crying or not.
Yeah. What do you think about the rocking? Is that self-comforting?
Yes, it's probably self-soothing of some sort, but it's also a bunch of nervous energy working its way out.
He was on his back on the bed, and I just...
Okay. And he was on. You said he was on his back. Okay. Where are your children now?
asleep in that room. Two are awake with their ear to the door. I go, whatever, go out. Please somebody come out.
Where are the other two at that are awake?
No, my bedroom.
And where's that at?
Right there, first one to your left.
Okay.
All right, just generally, John, does it seem like she has her answers together? Like, is this somebody that is in like traumatic grief answering these questions to you? Just be honest. Like, if it is, it is. If it's not, it's not.
She's just answering with a lot of detail. I've talked to a lot of people who are in crisis and who have lost, their rationalism. She seems to still be pretty rational, but emotional. There's no part of her that really reads hysteria. And it's easy to say that, but like, how long has it been at this point? I heard them say the time earlier. Did they say it was already after 5 a.m.?
Yeah, something like that.
It's been 2 hours. It's possible that the psychological and chemical high that she was feeling, whether that was adrenaline or whatever, it's possible that has burned out of her system by now too.
So I want to tell you about a case I worked because what this officer is kind of navigating through right now, I've actually stood in the middle of it. It doesn't get any simpler when the pressure goes up. This kind of deals with, I was a shift commander and there was an infant death. Those are the hardest to deal with. So the supervisor and deputies that responded there, I didn't want them to go alone, have to experience that alone. I wanted to oversee kind of that, but also it's a pretty, serious incident, we'll call it, because we don't know, infants aren't prone to dying just like that either. So I responded. And we were in the guy's house. He stayed up late. He was a gamer. He smoked a little weed or whatever. And the wife had gone to bed. It was like a newborn, like very young, very small baby. Very tragic. Like everybody's upset. The wife had gone to the hospital. And now we're in the house where they had taken the baby and the mom had left. And I'm in the house with this guy who's not happy with the police right now. And he's not happy that the police are there. And this is the delicate balance where you have to understand that you're dealing with somebody who just lost a child. The other side of it is he's also on probation and he's scared to death of having the cops in his house. So he gets his attorney on the phone, which is something I always encourage. If you're uncomfortable about something, let's go through your intermediary. Let's go through your attorney. And you know, he can talk sense into you basically.
Yeah. You could get him calmed down. You get a little control of the situation. You might start finding out some actual truth about it. And anything he says can now be used against him in a court of law.
Well, okay. And that's, so you bring a great point here. And this is kind of where the dilemma I'm at, because we don't know what happened. We don't know if we're going to find a pillow with blood on it. We don't know. And it's the same thing that cop is under. Like you can't search that house. You can definitely look around. I made reference to it earlier to see what's in plain view. But you don't have evidence of a crime yet. You're just there with on a death investigation. You're walking very, very
and
thin,
this guy's wary
tight
about
wire.
the cops. I get it. Yeah.
So he gets his attorney and he starts telling the attorney, you know, like what's going on. And he's like, the attorney gives him some weird advice about like, tell him you don't need them there anymore and just tell him goodbye. So he just kind of like pulls his phone down. And he's like, we're good. I don't need you here anymore. Bye. And I'm like, we're not leaving. I mean, and he's like,
dismissed.
He's like, I got my attorney on the phone, and I was like, perfect. Let me talk to your attorney, but we're not leaving. And so, you know, this is where we turn out, we look like the bad guy because now we're picking on this guy or you know, we're like, it's not even casting like suspicion on him, but we have an obligation for the little baby that died. And we have an obligation for the medical examiner to preserve the scene. And we have, you know, we have certain obligations, and we also have a constitution that we have to balance that, you know, they have a right to privacy in there. So, you know, my DEFCON 1 in that whole thing is we may have to secure this guy and just hold the entire scene. And as the detectives are on the way, start articulating the probable cause for a search warrant, because we don't know. And until the detectives get there, they're not going to know.
If they had done that in this case, if they had just presumed the worst, it's possible that they could have done a better job at preserving that evidence, like whatever was in the sink. But because the presumption is that there was an aneurysm or whatever was coming from EMS, you know, they treated it like an accidental death, and it was some time before charges even were eventually brought against Kouri. But let me ask you this, Drew, as a police officer in that scene, whether here on Kouri Richins' case or with the one with the infant who passed away, the paramedic tells you that they're pretty sure that this is an unattended death, but a natural one, that there's no foul play involved. How far does that play for you? That person's not a medical examiner. They're not a doctor. When the medical examiner comes to the scene, then it's a crime scene. But a paramedic telling you, hey, this was a pulmonary embolism or something, how far are you going to take that and run with it? Because that's an expert opinion, but it's not the definitive one.
It's not their call. There's actually footage of that I want to touch on in a second. But so now you just understand that this, you know, obviously the story is going to cut both ways. So, and you know, you also have to balance the compassion of a mother who is now telling you, like, my two little kids, they got their door to the ear, their ear to the door. I don't know how she knew that, but you know, she's saying the little kids are here, and you know, these cops, like, we're all humans, we're all fathers or whatever, mothers, or, you know,
traumatize the kids.
Yeah, we don't want to traumatize these little guys, and you know, like, they're getting ready to lose their dad, and their mom's like freaking out. So there's just a lot to think about that people don't think that we think about.
Is there any family members we can call right now?
Yeah, I need to call my mom. I need to call my mom so bad.
Okay.
I think I don't know. 911's still on the phone. I don't know.
Here.
I need to call his dad. He's gonna be okay, right? Like I got in bed and then I just got.
Yeah, they're doing their best. Okay, ma'am. Here, you can use my phone.
Quick question for you, Drew.
Yeah.
Deputy called me the other day, and I got a little recording there saying that our conversation was being recorded from his phone. Deputy lending his phone. Is this conversation that she's using? Is there any chance it's being recorded?
Probably not.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe if it's a department issued phone,
Yeah.
it's definitely being recorded on the if she's got it on speaker, which is a wise move, investigative wise. It's being picked up on the body cam.
Sure.
So, if she needs a moment of privacy too. Again, we're balancing here. We don't know that we have a crime yet. We got it.
This cop's a dark magician, and he's thinking 3 steps ahead.
What's going on? I don't know. Something's wrong with Eric. The police have Valentine here. It's like, I don't know what's happening.
I don't want to make too much of this, John, but she said something's wrong with Eric. The police are here and the ambulance is here.
I don't know. Do you want to tell the guy your son's dead over the phone? I mean, like,
no, she is talking to her mom.
Okay.
Now, what the way she's characterizing this incident is something's wrong with Eric and the cops are here and the ambulance is here. So in the list of priorities, we got Eric, the cops, then the people trying to save Eric.
Eric.
Where's he at? I'm on my way.
I think my partner found your phone. Is this it right here? Does he have any medical conditions or anything like that?
He has Lyme's disease.
Lyme's disease?
Nothing major, like,
Okay. So no heart problems or anything like that?
no, he just said his chest was hurting when he went to bed, but that's, not, if he doesn't drink enough water, when he gets on the bike downstairs, I don't know, it didn't make sense. And then he just said he was really tired because he got his allergy shots yesterday morning.
Okay.
With my son, they go much Chicago.
And then when did you discover him? What time?
I got up, I got my phone. It was maybe 3.
About 3.
3:15.
Did you immediately call the 911?
Yeah, well, I got up and, as soon as I turned over and he was cold,
Mm-hmm.
I just felt like something was wrong. So, I just put the blanket on it because I just thought I should keep my room cold. So and then I sat there for a minute and I just didn't feel like it's like breathing or anything. And so I just, oh my God.
Okay.
And he just felt so heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when did you call 911?
Yeah. Not only that, remembering too much detail is sometimes your enemy, but like you've got to take it in the totality of the circumstances. But she remembers so much of this. She's like, So then I felt him, and he just seemed heavy, and it didn't seem like he was breathing. And I said, Eric, and you know what I mean? Like, I think you're probably going to give a more general, like, I don't know. I came to bed and he was cold. Is he going to be okay? Like, I think there's just
I think it depends on when you ask this question. If someone's excited when they're on 911 and they tend to speed through a story, they can be detailed, but they can also be fast about it. They ultimately get to the point. She didn't ever answer the question as to when she dialed 911, and obviously because there's all this movement in the house where she gets up and walks around, and frankly, I'm kind of surprised at the level of detail that we now have for walking around inside a house. I guess she has this set up to a pedometer or something,
or Wi-Fi or something. Yeah,
I guess, yeah, Wi-Fi. But I don't know. I hold out a little bit of skepticism here because I don't know how I would behave in this situation. I don't know if there's a right way to behave. In some ways, I could see this, just to play further devil's advocate. You find the person that you love, stone cold, they're a corpse. You don't want to accept it. In some ways, dialing 911 is accepting reality that this person is dead or whatever. I could see someone just losing their shit and getting up and walking around. I mean, this also doesn't look like somebody who's going anywhere or doing anything. It looks like somebody who's just wandering around the house, which is what I do when I'm on the phone. So I don't.
Right. Yes, but luckily you don't have a non-breather. So that's kind of, a couple minutes before.
Yeah, I think I want a master bedroom.
So you're gonna there's a decision coming that just, probably most people watching miss entirely. This is where I can, kind of clue you in as to what's going on here. That's the sergeant right there that showed up. The supervisor's going to show up on a death scene. That's kind of like a no-brainer, hopefully anyway. And just to make sure that, everything is okay and, all of the right stuff is in motion. Detectives are called and whatnot. So you're going to hear the briefing that the deputy gives in a second. The sergeant kind of responds with, what he's already done. And then just for, the rest of the story, normally what happens is the sergeant steps outside and calls me, the shift commander, and tells me what happened. If I'm not already there. And the problem with this is because I might be on another call or whatever, we're playing a telephone game with, this investigation. And if it turns out, years later that it was a death investigation / homicide investigation, and we weren't treating it as such, it haunts you. It'll stick with you that, man, I should have just been there to make sure that, you can't fix everything. You can't change anything, but
you also can't know everything in the moment that's happening.
Hindsight's always 20/20, but listen how he whispers his words to the sergeant, and the sergeant replies in full voice.
She said went to bed at 9:30. She slept with the kids because then she goes to bed. When she went to bed, around 3 o'clock, moved into her bed. He was cold and heavy. He has Lyme disease. He got an allergy shot yesterday. He might have taken a gummy, THC gummy, last night. So, other than that, just Lyme disease.
I already have dispatched all the Emmy and Dix.
It's probably gonna be bigger since he's here.
I don't know. Whoever the on-call is.
He had an aneurysm or something with all the blood.
So now the sergeant did say, like, we've already called the ME's on the way, which means they could be sending an investigator out. But what people don't realize is, like, the jurisdiction of the body in the investigation is generally on a death scene like that, a suspicious circumstance death.
I was going to say, people die every day. Think about how often a baby is born in your town. What the common person doesn't realize is how often police and EMS units are going to unattended deaths.
Yeah.
And so police officers and paramedics see this every day, multiple times a day. So what is it that you're seeing at the scene, Drew, that qualifies this for medical examiners to come out in the middle of the night, which of course is not going to be a big deal. They do that all the time, but you're going to have some rationale for them coming out there. Is his age and just the suspiciousness of the cause of death, is that going to be plenty?
Yeah, it's definitely his age. Like it's an anomaly. If something seems off, it's definitely off for a reason. And, you'll get that into the hands of the medical examiner and let them make the decision of whether they're going to respond or not. Generally, they're going to come take the custody of the body anyway. Sometimes they'll send a forensic examiner out of some sort, or an investigator rather. At a very minimum, you're going to want your forensic team, your crime scene investigators, if your department has one, you're definitely going to want them to come out to process the scene, just take general photos so you have a preservation of what it looked like, right after, in the event this turns into some kind of homicide investigation, which it did. But I think, here's something like, it just doesn't get talked about in most true crime coverage of especially in this case. But EMS kind of cleared the scene. But before they did, this officer did, this interview, and it doesn't make the EMS report. This interaction they're about to have is probably like the purpose of the EMS report is to talk about what time they got there, what the patient, the state of the patient, what they did to help them recover, and just like vital statistics and stuff like that. And
stuff to help you avoid being sued, of course, too. You have to make your due diligence. You have to make sure you do your due diligence, and you also have to make sure that everything's being properly documented, that you took every step that you would normally take, a reasonable paramedic would take in that case to preserve life.
Right. So the interview with the paramedic, generally, if there is one done, that it belongs in the police report. And sometimes that ball gets dropped. Sometimes there is no interview with the paramedic until after, a couple days later, and it's a detective going back and, doing the interview and trying to make them, or, trying to have them recreate the memory, which is not always efficient.
So you're saying it's best to just do it right away?
Yeah.
There's a lot of blood for some unknown reason.
Were you first on scene?
We were second. The fire guy was here before us.
And there was blood before they get...
A little bit coming out as soon as we start doing compressions with the Lucas is when the blood came out. So.
Okay. All right.
I don't know.
No pulse or anything?
No. Okay. No, he was cold. I think he'd been down a while. Not a long time, but he'd been down a minute. He was asystole the whole time, so.
Okay. All right.
Asystole is flatline. When you have on TV shows, when somebody's completely gone, when you hear that tone, that's what asystole is.
Yeah. Pretty young.
Yeah.
Maybe took some gummies.
Yeah, that's what she said.
And then the hydrocodone. I think there was hydrocodone or something. From
It was
96 or something.
2016.
2016, yeah. Pretty old.
Did he take that?
We don't know. It was sitting there, though.
It's in the drawer right there.
There's something.
It
What
is.
is this right here? Is that it? Are you taking for Lyme disease?
Yeah.
It's Robert Crozer.
So you're going to get a consent to search, or it's going to turn into a search warrant because you're going to want to take that medicine. You're going to want to take everything there. But I think that they ended up a day or so later going back and photographing. So that's the scene. So what I want to get into now is what happened in court this week. Here's something weird, John. In investigating Kouri Richins' associates, it was discovered that in 2006, her mother, Lisa Darden, was living with an adult female with whom she was having a romantic relationship. And in April of that year, her romantic partner died unexpectedly, and an autopsy report of the female partner showed that the immediate cause of her death was drug poisoning from an overdose of oxycodone. And further investigation showed that Lisa Darden had been named as the beneficiary of her partner's estate a short time before her death. And the female did have current prescriptions for oxycodone and reportedly struggled with abusing her meds. She, however, was not in a state of recovery from addiction at the time of her death. And so based on that detective's training and experience, that likely ruled out the possibility of an accidental overdose. So there's history here, John. Like it's not like that goes towards the circumstance. It's not necessarily, that doesn't mean like mother, like daughter, and it just could be purely coincidental. But
to me, it cuts both ways, though. I mean, when you have people who are doing dangerous things, sometimes you get bad outcomes. You could have also had Lisa Darden's partner pass away from a drug overdose. We have everybody in our lives has had somebody pass away from a drug overdose. It's an epidemic. And you could be looking at a coincidence here, but when it comes down to Eric, it's possible that he overdosed, and it's possible that that overdose was assisted. If Kouri knows that every night Eric goes to bed that he's taking a cocktail of alcohol, oxycodone, Seroquel, various things to help him get through the pain and fall asleep, all she has to do is add a little bit to that cocktail without him knowing, and all of a sudden he's in dangerous territory that he didn't ever set up for himself. So it's still impossible to tell what the intent was, if she had intent to do that, because we don't have the fentanyl from the Moscow Mule cups.
The prosecution had a problem going into the beginning of the week, and by the end of the week, that problem had gotten significantly worse. So they need that supply chain. If you remember the housekeeper, Carmen Lauber, I think that was her name. She's the one that bought the dope for Kouri Richins. And then she was saying that that Kouri asked for fentanyl and she bought fentanyl from this guy. This guy is Robert Crozier, and you're about to hear from him. He's on the stand.
You spell your last name Crozier?
Yes, sir.
Sir, do you have a criminal drug history?
I do.
Can you please explain it to us?
I had a distribution charge in December of 22, and 2 possession charges in 23.
Were you dealing drugs in December of 2022?
Yes.
When did you begin dealing drugs?
I'm not sure, sometime around 2020, maybe.
And were you dealing drugs throughout early 2022?
Yeah, I was. As far as I remember, she was asking for Roxy's for the oxycodone.
So this is significant because what Carmen is testifying to is that she bought fentanyl, and of course the victim OD'd on fentanyl. That was his cause of death. What he's saying is, I didn't sell her fentanyl. I sold her. He originally said that, but then he, I guess, kind of had a moment of clarity. I don't know what happened. If God just came down, and I don't know what happened. But at any rate, he had this moment of clarity where he's like, no, I sold her Roxy's. I never sold her fentanyl. There's
also a problem here where even if he sold, who was the intermediary? Cindy Lauper, whoever even if he sold her oxycodone and it was laced with fentanyl or contaminated with fentanyl, here's the problem, though, that even if that wound up in the middleman and it wound up in Kouri's hands and that wound up in the Moscow Mule, now we've still got a problem with intent, though, because he died of something, of a drug that apparently was not part of the supply chain of drugs. Well, I mean, he died of fentanyl, but we have Cindy saying that she supplied fentanyl, but that's not the drug that was got sold to him. So even if Kouri put that in there, we have an intent problem. Time after time.
Did she identify what she was asking for by any label other than Roxy's?
This is the prosecution asking the questions, by the way.
No.
Did you at that time believe that Roxy's meant oxycodone?
Yes, the only thing that I know that they mean. Excuse me.
When the police asked you whether she was asking for oxys and got M30s. Do you recall how you responded?
It says no, she would have got what she asked for. Okay.
He said he doesn't recall.
Sustained.
So he said it says, because what happened was he did an interview with detectives when he was in jail, and he was coming down off of a heater, off of a high of some sort. And he gave them a full interview. He was cooperative and all that. The problem was that he wouldn't write it out. So they wrote it out, or they took notes and they had him verify what he said at the end of the conversation. I'm pretty sure they recorded it. And he agreed to everything that was on it. But then a couple of months before the trial, he goes to Kouri's attorney or somehow gets in touch with Kouri's attorney, or Kouri's attorney interviews him. And he says, no, that's not actually what happened, though. Like, I see what it says happened, but that's not actually what happened. He's not saying that the interview is incorrect. What he's saying is what happened is incorrect on the interview. So he was given the transcript of the interview, and now what he's hanging his hat on or what he's testifying to is like, well, that's what it says there. I don't remember saying it, but that's what it says. It's what it says I said. And it's kind of what he's like. I don't think he's being evasive when he do that. I think he just genuinely, his brain was fried and he doesn't remember. This guy is in here testifying in an immunity deal. And he's given me no reason to believe that he's being untruthful about anything. And as a matter of fact, he's just like any other informant that I've ever dealt with. It's like he can verify. He's a dope dealer. You just know that by the way he's talking. He can give you prices. He's telling you he can identify the pills. And there's no real reason at this point, because he's risking his own judicial punishment if he lies. There's no reason to disbelieve him at this point, which makes
there's a little bit beyond criminal prosecution. He could be held civilly liable for his role in Eric's if he admits that he supplied the fentanyl. So there's a little bit of a reason there for him to protect himself.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
Sir, do you recall whether police asked you if Carmen Lauber knew there was fentanyl in the pills that you sold her?
Again, yeah, it said that.
It's a yes or no question.
Do you recall it?
I don't recall. I really
huge fan of this judge, by the way.
don't recall the conversation with the police at all, other than I had the conversation with him.
I do watch enough Dr. G to know that he does want someone to pay attention to him by raising his eyebrows, and the shrugging of both shoulders indicates that he's probably telling the truth.
I don't remember details of it other than what I've read.
And you met her at the Maverick to sell them, correct?
Yes.
And that...
Do you notice okay, so now this is the defense asking him questions, but do you notice the change in tone? Like, it's almost F the police, basically, when you're dealing with a prosecutor. Now you're dealing with the defense attorney, and you're all in it, and you're all like calm and cordial. I mean, it could be her delivery, who knows, but
well, the defense attorney, he's not going to necessarily have an adversarial relationship with the defense attorney, because I don't think that he cares what happens to Kouri. So he can talk with her back and forth, and it's no skin off of his nose.
Yeah.
When he's talking to the prosecutor, first of all, he has an adversarial relationship with the state's attorney's office in general, but I think he can kind of let his guard down when he's talking to her, because whatever happens to Kouri happens, right?
Yep.
You remember it was early 2022, correct?
Yeah, it was around this time.
Okay.
There was snow then.
So we're talking about early February of 2022, which is relevant. He's saying there was snow on the ground. It was this time. It's relevant because don't forget the sandwich that was allegedly filled with poison. That was February 14th.
Okay. So can you remember what you were charging per pill for 30 milligram oxycodones?
Like either $25 or $30 a piece.
$25 or $30 per pill.
Mhm.
You weren't selling fentanyl at that time, but when you did sell fentanyl, what did that sell for?
About the same.
You sold fentanyl for about the same?
Mhm.
Are you aware that there was a time that fentanyl was sold for considerably less than oxycodone?
Yes.
And would that have been earlier when fentanyl first started in the market, or?
Is she trying to say that because of the price that he charged for it, he would have known that there was fentanyl in it?
Yeah, it kind of backfires on her, though.
Yeah.
Would that just depend on who was selling it?
It just depends on who was selling it,
Okay.
where you got it from. You know, if you know a Hondo that'll give them to you for 80 cents, then yeah, but
That's true informant speak right there.
He could
That's
also just say, I'm not a very good drug dealer, obviously.
Yeah, well, no, he's an enterprising young man. I mean,
All right, that's fair.
so think about it. The supply chain definitely took damage during that part of the trial. Something else, though, that was in front of this jury at the same time, it just tells a very different story. So when somebody manually deletes text threads and call logs from their phone before investigators can even seize it, sometimes that presents a problem. I mean, before I give you my read, is there an innocent explanation for deleting text messages off your phone?
I would say there's an innocent explanation and that it's not all that innocent, but Kouri is already somebody with a lot to hide because she's ashamed of her association with Grossman. She doesn't want these things to come out. I think she's a true crime fan. She wanted to snuggle up and watch a murder documentary. I think she knows that she's going to be looked at first, whether she's guilty or not guilty. But I just think that once you know you're going to be coming under some kind of scrutiny, that you're going to have to give your phone to somebody, I could completely understand why she would want to erase these things, even if they weren't necessarily evidence of guilt about her committing a murder. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Now I want to talk about Kouri Richins' phones. Did you analyze 3 phones that belonged to Kouri Richins for this case?
I did.
When you did the analysis for that white iPhone, was there evidence of deletions?
Yes.
Was there evidence of text message deletions?
Yes.
Evidence of call log deletions?
Yes.
What was missing from that phone for January 2022, February 2022, and March 2022?
Hundreds of text messages at least. There were also missing most of the web history artifacts in that device.
Call histories as well?
Call logs, etc.
Were there patterns of deletions in this phone similar to the white iPhone?
There were some deletions noted, but not in the same manner as the previous phone, no.
What do you mean not in the same manner?
Meaning there were not big chunks of hundreds of texts missing from the device that I noted, compared to the new phone did not have that type of deletion in it.
So, John, the prosecution spent the week just like building a pattern. The defense spent that week, just trying to build an entirely different one. And what they introduced, like, I'll be honest, is more significant than most coverage is giving it credit for. I mean, like, you're right to question it and to play kind of devil's advocate on it. There are a couple defense theories that are pretty strong that we're going to talk about in the next episode, namely he was having an affair supposedly. What's your take on what we're going forward?
Well, when we talk about this next episode, if he was having an affair, obviously that devastates everything for him financially, but I think it also causes a lot of emotional devastation. And we're talking about 2 people who were both going through it. We're talking about a guy who already recreationally abused drugs, I guess, in the sense that he was trying to get pain relief from whatever his body had gone through. And for me, we just have to, the missing fentanyl is the biggest piece. You don't have the physical evidence, so you have to shore it up with this narrative, this convincing narrative of circumstantial evidence. And it can be done, but for me, it's just grasping at straws to say that this sandwich incident was a prior attempt. And that in these pills that were sold that fentanyl was there, and that Kouri knew it. Like I said, there's a intent problem. If she meant to dose him up with oxycodone, but not at a lethal amount, and it happened to be fentanyl, then she might be legally responsible for his death, but there's not intent to commit murder there. With the motive, maybe you could push through and still convince a jury of that, but there's a lot there, and it's going to come down to what the jury is convinced by when it comes to the story, because we are just missing so much there. I am surprised that conversations that Eric had about his wife trying to kill him were allowed to come in, that those weren't hearsay incidents, that the sandwich which was untested gets to be an artifact at all in a criminal case. I'm just surprised that these things were even allowed in. But if the prosecution can build up this pattern of behavior that Kouri had every reason in the world to do it, and that she was gunning for him, and she had one failed attempt, and the incident with her mother's former partner as a guide for how to get it done, and knowing that Eric was going to be dosing himself up and that all she had to do to add to that, it's possible the jury will get there. But I'm going to maintain my presumption that she's innocent until they prove it to me, Drew.
So I want your opinion, meaning you, the viewer. John and I need to know where this leaves us after this episode. Like, you've seen like what we covered. We covered the body cam, we covered motive. We talked about the weakness in the supply chain, which we talked about in episode 1 that we did. So why don't you leave us a comment? Where do you think we're at? Who's on the right side of this? Who's on the wrong side of this? We know medical examiners are coming. Financial experts are coming, even though they completely removed the financial crimes from this part of her prosecution. So, the mechanism question is still open, how the fentanyl got into his body, where it came from. So we're going to be watching for that in the upcoming week.
We'll be talking about how Grossman got on the stand, and even though he admitted he broke down because he loves her so much, and I think he was embarrassed by what was going on. He talked about how he was inspired to turn state's witness, and if somebody who loves Kouri that much and was willing to take the kind of risks that he was, if he can believe she's guilty, what does that mean to the jury?
Right. Perfect. So we got a boyfriend, we got a medical examiner, we got states, we got a private investigator. Interesting week coming up. Make sure you like and subscribe if you like this content. I would love it if you left a comment for us.
Check out the last episode we did on it. Just came out. It was kind of a primer on the case. Make sure you check that out in our prior episodes, and stick right here for the Kouri Richins case, because if you want to people who are on the inside of investigations from the very start, when it rings into 911 to the detective on the scene, Comm Center's got you covered. So stay right here. Drew, great episode.
10,000
more episodes of Comm Center.